Hi guys, welcome back to this interview series called The Value of Purpose. I'm extremely blessed and very lucky to have Loughlin Hickey on the phone on the other line with me. He's in the UK right now, I'm in Spain. Loughlin is a senior advisor to a Blueprint for Better Business and a trustee of the Blueprint Trust. He's maybe Loughlin actually best placed to describe in a sentence or two what is it that the Blueprint does. I'll let you do that, if you don't mind.
No, I'm happy to. I think what the Blueprint does, quite frankly, is make people confident in their own gut instincts about what is missing and what could be there. So what Blueprint has done is to give a language to an intuition that says, surely I can move beyond myself in a business context as well as in a social context.
Yep.
And to give them the courage of that thinking and really some more evidence and backup that they can turn that into reality. So
yeah.
I think essentially we're a confidence builder.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I've actually been on the Blueprint immersion that the Blueprint run, very in-depth, I think 2 or 3 days I spent in Cambridge, and it was really about educating and equipping people like myself to be able to then go out into the world with a set of frameworks and a deeper understanding about how purpose is translating and can translate in a business sense. Just for everyone else on the dialing and listening in, the Blueprint also do some advisory work for corporations. And going back to Loughlin, he's a chartered accountant, the former global head of tax, I think it was, at KPMG, and a man of a lot of wisdom. So again,
just grey hairs.
Lots of grey hairs, but that's a good sign. It's a sign of wisdom, right? So thanks a lot for being with us, Loughlin. And I just want to focus this interview a little bit. It's called The Value of Purpose, okay? And my avatar, my target audience are CEOs, owners, and founders of established businesses. And I want to help them because a lot of the big corporates have this notion of purpose now. And a lot of small social enterprises seem to be born out of this purpose movement. But I feel that there's a little bit of a disconnect in terms of existing established businesses that were not born out of a sense of clear purpose, but who want to evolve and transition in this direction. So I hope that the conversations that we can have can stimulate some thought and some ideas for these owners and founders and CEOs to help to evolve their business models and to bring more kind of general prosperity both to themselves and to society at large. So welcome again, Loughlin, and thanks for being here. Why don't you kick off by telling us, a really open question, but how do you see the role of business in society?
The way I see the role of business in society is to really understand what it's there for and then deliver. So let me give you my view of what business does. Essentially, business is a collective of people coming together for a collective venture. Now that may sound fine for an entrepreneur, but quite frankly, everyone who joins a large company instinctively is joining it not just to be paid, but to have a social context and to be proud of what they do. And that's what I think businesses lose their way, to say, how am I judged, particularly in the private sector? Is it just by the profits I deliver, or is it by the way I deliver them? So what I would say is there are two models of the world, both of which are legitimate. One is that business is a nexus of contracts with the relationships it has, be they employees, suppliers, customers, regulators, and also society, which is why people talk about the license to operate. And that's fine, but a nexus of contracts doesn't have an innate fairness to it. If you actually think of business the other way around, which is if business is a collective venture of people, business has two dimensions. One is to continue the growth of those people. They've come out of education at whatever level, join the organization, but are not fully formed. So one of the ways that business can think about itself is how are we collectives that form character for the better good of the business and society at large? And how do I judge that character? I judge it by the goods and services I bring to market. Are they goods that are truly good? Are they services that truly serve? How do I source them? How do I sell them? Is that the character I want to be? Now, if you think about business in those contexts, there is still there as a measure of profit. I want to be successful. But the nexus of contracts now has an overlay to say, if my driving force is to produce people of character, I will make sure my contracts with my employees, with my suppliers, my customers, my communities reflect a fairness that goes beyond contracts. So that's why I see the role of business society being a force for good for mutual benefit.
Amazing. Tell us a little bit about your personal journey, working for KPMG at senior level and then transitioning away from that. What was the impetus for change? And tell us a little bit about your personal journey if you can.
The impetus for change was a time to move on. And when I moved on, I wanted to close off some of my learning loop. KPMG was a wonderful learning experience, but I wanted to close it off and learn the lessons. I mean, as a parallel, I was very fortunate when I was at KPMG, I was sent to Harvard for 3 months on an executive education course. And I stayed behind for 2 weeks afterwards on my own in my hotel room. It's a very sad story, this. And just honing all of what I'd learned so that I could then use it to effect rather than have it buzzing around in my mind. So that's what I did when I left KPMG. 2 things drove me to look at purpose as a platform. One is as a leader within KPMG, both with clients and through my management positions, I was fascinated by how different teams performed. With similar skills in a technical world, why did one team perform better than the other? And when I was doing global work with clients or in my global management capacity, why would people work on my teams when their incentives were actually local? So there was some secret juice that actually produced that performance. And I put that down to a sense of wanting to contribute to something better and a vehicle to do that. So that was kind of the essence of that. And at the same time, being in the tax world, we got to a very, very successful point that we were very smart people doing very smart things. But we began to forget that the smart things were there to make the tax law work, not just to make money for people. And we had some good encounters with some tax authorities when they finally asked us, and it was in the UK 15 years ago now, when they said, are you doing the right thing by your people by recruiting the best graduates and some of my best people to work on tax planning? Which was a damn fine question. And we just went back and to make sure we realized that being technically brilliant, being successful financially, did not mean you were living out your role in society. So we refocused and began to realize the reason we were successful and were allowed to be successful is because we played a hugely valuable role in society. Those who take advice were much more compliant. We help complex laws work, and we help clients make choices. But unless you understood what you were there for, you could just simply follow the money. And we were successful on both ends. We realized actually our people need purpose, our clients want a sense of direction, and society wants us to play our full role. So those two combinations gave me to think about, I want to do something. I wrote a paper, I started working with some people who were tackling this problem. And then, the idiot thing is I volunteered to try and solve a problem with a group of other people, and we got together and formed Blueprint for Better Business with the thinking that business has the resources, the skills to actually make a difference, but sometimes it didn't know what difference it was supposed to make. So what if we could connect society, here's the difference we'd love you to make, business with the skills you can make it, and what a brilliant combination that could be. So that's kind of what we did.
And also make those changes at scale, be able to scale that change. That's such a key factor.
We wanted scale, but Nash, the thing I would say is we also tested it with very small companies, because our theory, which is the theory of the human person working as a collective, works once you get 2 people together.
Yeah.
We wanted to test it at scale to actually make it work at scale, but the theory should work and does work, and I coach some smaller businesses. It works once 2 people come together.
Yeah.
And that's the lovely bit, which means if the big businesses can do this, imagine the impact down the supply chain.
Absolutely.
And for the entrepreneurial community. Yeah. And that's the lovely thing. I think it transcends all aspects of business and society.
So tell me, so there's obviously this kind of shift going on. I mean, purpose as a notion is not necessarily a new notion. I mean, it's probably very old. But how do you think this kind of rise of consciousness about purpose is reshaping how business is seeing itself?
Well, in some ways, the rising consciousness of the word purpose is one of the most dangerous features of this new discussion. Yeah. Because the danger is purpose becomes the new CSR, the new corporate responsibility, where people use it as a badge to actually do something. Where we will go to is we use the word purpose in a very particular way, which is the signal to someone to actually be the fullest person they can be. So very crudely, our thinking starts with the building block of the human person, where we're each, prone for survival instinct to be self-interested, but yearn to be in relationship, to seek meaning, to create something better. So what we see purpose as, and this is where it tests whether it works or not, can you actually use it as an emotional trigger to make people the best they can be, is to remove them from fear and disrespect, which keeps us in ourselves and self-interested, to the place where we yearn to be, all of us, where we can seek meaning, we can contribute, and actually do that in relationship. If we can, in business, think about, it's not easy, but look at the conditions that keep us down, which are fear and disrespect, which feed self-interest, to the place we'd like to go, not naively, we need to look after ourselves, but what if we can trigger a sense of a job description that has meaning, a sense of a purpose where we come together that has something beyond ourselves, and a sense that actually we treat each other as potential relationships rather than transactions, then we make a huge, huge difference. So we think purpose has a really important meaning, which is it's an emotional trigger that we can all lean in to be able to contribute to a common good.
Yeah. Yeah, and where do you think we are in this journey of kind of transformation on a kind of macro level? Is there a tipping point in sight?
Well, on the macro level, the good news is we've realised we've got a big problem staying as we are.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the bad side of the macro level, we think purpose is the simple golden bullet to solve it. So everyone's talking about brand and purpose, and I can get you one in 60 seconds. But in between that, the really good news is a slow awakening where people are saying that the alternative view actually plays to what they know. We've got some very smart people around the world, and we've got some really smart, good people as well in business who are saying, I now can hear a narrative that speaks to me, but doesn't ask me to sacrifice the joy and success of business in order to actually enjoy what I do. And that's a slowly growing but powerful cadre of people to say, you're not asking me to make a trade-off between purpose, profit, and success in business. What you're saying to me is, which in some ways I don't like, is you're now presenting me with a choice. I can stay as I am, which is treat people as self-interested and effectively command and control and drive for efficiency, which works, be very clear. But unfortunately, you're now presenting me with an alternative view that says, what if I could engage people for their fullest benefit as employees, customers, suppliers, communities? That takes a lot more effort. But now you're telling me that actually produces a better business for sustainable long term, with a better outcome financially for my own people, the world, and the investors. And in terms of fulfillment, actually creates a better business and a society that wants my business to be successful and sustain it. And that is where we're thinking that sort of the macro, that we've got some really good leads out there now saying two things. Thank you for presenting the alternative. Is, oh my word, you've now made it much more difficult because now I have a choice.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how immensely excited that makes me feel, and I mean, it's not something I'm hearing for the first time, but it's just deeply exciting. We're at a point where there's so much potential and opportunity, but it has to be done in the right way, as you're pointing to. Let's go down to the level of the CEO and the entrepreneur of this mid-sized established company who were not necessarily born out of a sense of social purpose, but who are witness to the fact that there's this evolution going on, and who want a piece of it, who want to know what they should do and how they could go about transitioning their existing business model without compromising that business model in any way, and transferring it and transitioning it into its new direction. What advice would you give to those entrepreneurs?
Well, the first advice I give is that the wonderful thing about the thinking of which we are part is we have the inherent capability within us to actually transform. It's not something that some people have and some people don't. It's within all of us. And that's the exciting thing, is to unlock it. Yeah. But the first level, quite frankly, is to ask yourself two honest questions as a CEO and as someone who wants to be aligned to a particular company. And we ask two very simple questions. One is, what do you think the role of your business is in society? And that provokes a discussion because people need to be clear. Yeah. And what we get to on that is, what is your value chain? What is the causality of making the profits? Is it I aim for profits and therefore I drive people towards it, which is the shareholder value maximization model? Or is it I understand how I create value? I either have the greatest customer base, the greatest product, the greatest way of serving clients. I actually serve a need that's more important. And from that, profit comes, which I will share with investors. That simple thing, what is my role in society, tied to an operating model. And there's lots of assumptions out there, and we go to lots of boards, and they look at each other, and it's obvious. And then in a room of 20 people, there's 20 obvious answers that come out that don't actually coalesce with each other. Yeah. So the first reason is, what is the role of my business society? What is my operating model that shows how we actually generate value for the long term? And the second is, what is it that you believe motivates people to give of their fullest potential? Or the subtext is, what do you think motivates people to give discretionary effort? And once again, we then start to have a big discussion, which has never been had before. It's an assumption, because people have been trained in a way that is subliminally saying, our belief of people is they're self-interested, and I can move them to my self-interest by incentivizing themselves, mainly through money, status, power, rather than actually, then when they ask themselves, is that how I'm motivated, they would say no. Well, but if we are the same race around the world, where we're designed to be these people, why is it that you are the only unique person in the world? And then they begin to realize that their assumptions also drive the structures, processes, and tools they use to actually drive behavior. So essentially, we ask this question about motivation because our hidden bias about others actually makes us react in advance. And business management and economics is a social science, not a pure science. Yeah. So my assumption drives process, drives behaviors. It provokes much the same behavior. The good thing about that is when people realize it, they say, oh my word, so you're telling me if I think people are self-interested, I can bend them to my will for their own self-good, but essentially I become a command and control organization, which works as long as I keep the pressure on. But if I change my view and say I want people aligned to me for discretionary effort and gain, I have to change my dialogue. And now, unfortunately, you're telling me, oh my word, that works just as well, if not even better, but I've got to treat people as humans. And once they get that, and my systems need to be human, they need to be efficient, but you move from efficiency, which is basically using potential, to productivity, which is unleashing potential.
Wow, say that again for everyone else.
It's the difference between efficiency, which really replicable specialist tasks that basically uses potential, to productivity, which regards and releases imagination and innovation because it unleashes potential rather than uses it.
Amazing. Love that. I was going to ask you what a good starting point for this journey would be, and you've already said what a good starting point would be. How can we build on that? So CEO sits down with his team, his exec team, perhaps as a starting point, and they ponder these questions: what's the social value of my business, and what is it that fundamentally motivates people to I was going to say extract, but that's the wrong word, for them to experience their fullest potential. Where can they go from there? What's the kind of, could you just break it down in a modular way? Like, what are the things that a business would need to assess and understand in order to be able to move to the next thing? And how does the journey look? Could you just flesh it out?
Yeah, sure. And in some ways, Nash, I would not start with a big revelation about purpose and journey. That's there to provoke a discussion about what assumptions do we have on the table. The best way to do it is the other way around, which works at a large company level and a small company level, is what is the presenting problem? Because unless there's an issue, why would you bother to tackle it?
That's right.
So you start with the presenting problem, and the presenting problem may be lack of growth, lack of engagement, lack of ability to recruit. Something you mentioned earlier, which I agree with, is everyone is waiting for me, the CEO, to tell them what to do.
Yeah.
So you look at the presenting problem.
Yeah.
So that's where you start, not with the bigger picture.
Absolutely.
And then you say to yourself, well, let's be honest about this. Why is there a problem? The reality will be is someone's not meeting my expectations. So what's really going on is I have an expectation. The relationship I rely on, it might be a colleague, it might be a supplier, it might be a customer, it might be a regulator, is not doing, very crudely, what I want them to do.
Yeah.
Because if they did what I wanted, I'd be more successful.
Yeah.
So that's presenting problem, I'm being honest. But it tends to come down to a relationship. You then ask yourself, well, maybe I am causing some of these problems because I've now just learned that my behaviors and biases send signals that may close people down. So then you might say, okay, what are the fears these people have of being open and being in a relationship rather than a contractual transaction? How do I get the vulnerability when they open up? So part of it will be what we will call the 10 fears, is what are the fears they have about the relationship and what part am I causing? And then you tend to get to the level 3, which is the reality is no one's ever had the conversation. No one actually knows what I'm trying to achieve, why it's exciting, and why they should lean in and help me. And also, I don't send the signal that I'm open to learning. And if you remember what we said right at the beginning, in terms of our whole thinking is based around the human person and people leaning into each other, there are 2 fundamental aspects. One is, am I sending signals that I respect you? And 2, am I sending signals that together we're better than the 2 of us competing? So if I can send a signal of respect and the opportunity to contribute to something better, I can solve that relationship. So coming back to your first question, where I would start is, what is the presenting problem? Let's work out which relationship needs to be nurtured. How do I nurture that relationship? And realize that I myself, my assumptions and behaviors, are part of the relationship. And then you start to unlock it. And then you get to the macro level that says, oh, what if we could send a signal to multiple people about what we stood for and why we want them to lean in? And that's where we would get to this whole point of role in society, thinking about people, and a vehicle for that is a purpose that says, here's what we stand for, here's what we're excited about, here's what we're trying to achieve. Would you like to be part of this adventure? And that's where purpose becomes macro. But I would start micro. Unless there's a problem, why would you bother? Unless there's an opportunity, why would you bother? when you put them together, you then understand it's about relationships. Relationships drive business. Strong relationships drive stronger businesses. Discretionary effort is what is the secret sauce of any successful, sustainable business.
Absolute dynamite, really. I mean it. That's just brilliant. I think you can really build something off that foundation. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing that, Loughlin. Moving on a little bit, the purpose study, Edelman's purpose study. One of the things that jumped out at me is that they have an infographic with the summary of it. One of the things they talk about is depth and not breadth in relation to action. So let's just make the assumption now, for the sake of this conversation, that our leaders and our entrepreneurs have been on this journey. They've been through this examination process that you mentioned, and they've come to the conclusion that actually they want this social contract, they want this purpose, and they want to create this kind of business model. Now, assume they've explored and uncovered their purpose. Talk to us about depth versus breadth in terms of action, and what kind of action is required to turn these notions into something that's tangible, that's real, and that drives value.
Well, for depth, what I would say is a word you used earlier, I think, is authenticity, is what would someone expect of the business I'm in. So here's my thought process that would say, what are the big problems that the world is facing? Yeah, and well, you can choose, doesn't really matter. What are the things I care about, and I think we should care about as a business, which is the next layer. The next layer is, what is it that is part of who we are as a business proposition that is best placed to help contribute to solving this problem?
Yes.
And then you get to say, well, okay, how do I then design my goods and services and the way we behave to solve that problem for the mutual benefit of society and the business I've created? So that's the way I would layer it. The depth, I would say, is the connectivity with what the business is. So I would say depth and authenticity are the same thing.
Yeah.
And I must say there's a kind of really good cipher for this with the Business and Sustainable Development Commission report that came out this year, I think February, when they said, which I think is a really good linking point to the SDGs, if you think about the SDGs as needs of the world that need to be solved, there must be value. And whilst it's a bit trite, but I think it sends the right signal that there's $12 trillion of opportunity in solving the world's needs.
Yeah.
This is not a valueless thing. I think even Peter Drucker said that if you think about every crisis and every social need as an opportunity where business has the skills and the savvy to step in and help, not exploit, you can then start to see that social needs create true value.
Yeah.
Solving true value actually produces economic value, which then, quite frankly, is then distributed back to the society that keeps you going for the next opportunity. It doesn't mean we're looking for crisis. We don't need crisis enough. But it's simply saying social needs and being in the private sector and driving purpose and profit are aligned. They're not disaligned.
Yeah, but one doesn't have to go very far to find crisis, as it were. I mean, there's a manifestation of all manner of problems in every industry sector that you could possibly imagine. I think just, a deep understanding of your own business model would highlight some of the challenges that are around it. So, and I think that message actually will resonate with a lot of entrepreneurs who have this opportunistic mindset. They're looking to solve problems. They're not trying to create a valueless business. They actually want to solve problems, and that's part of what drives them and motivates them. So I think that's also an element of psychology that's really worth thinking about as an entrepreneur. Is when we look at these social problems, so how are we as a business, given our resources, our talents, our unique abilities, how are we well placed to actually address some of these issues that are arising through this conversation? It's excellent.
Well, I agree, but also it's Business 101 that unless there is an unmet or poorly met need, there isn't real space other than commodity thinking it's differentiation thinking that makes a difference. And then you need to attract the right people to solve the problem the right way. And that then brings this whole idea of purpose and people leaning in.
Yeah.
Because if you're not differentiated,
yeah,
the only commodity you've got left is price and power.
Yeah. And everyone is on that same bandwagon. So, yeah. So you talked a little bit about this, but I just wanted to delve a little bit more into it. So what cautions do you have around this kind of purpose movement, and how do you advise entrepreneurs to kind of steer clear of any of the traps, if you like?
The research helps us. So the research will say that a purposeful company will attract the best employees. If they're nurtured, they will actually become much more innovative and much more outgoing towards the customers. The customers themselves will lean into the organisation because of A, the purpose, and there's a connection, and the employees. And if you deal with communities who have needs, you're fine. So that's the good news. The bad news is the research also shows that if you're only doing it to make money and you're inauthentic, you will actually dismantle your business at the same time.
Yeah.
And therefore, you have to get it in the right order to say, I genuinely believe there is a need. I genuinely believe that to make my business better, I need to release the best of human potential. And if I do that, profits will flow.
Yeah.
And that causality has got to be the right way around. If you do it the other way around to say, I've heard the latest way to make money is to have a purpose statement, and yet you act as if command and control is what it's all about, you will very soon send a signal that basically I'm being used for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And why do you think the research shows that? Why do you think it shows that if you do this in an inauthentic way, if that's even a word, that you're penalized? Why is that?
It's because we're pushing against the human psyche. So if I join an organisation, and there's a really good study by Katie Bailey from Sussex University, that if you try and force values on someone, is they try and shift themselves to be that person because they want to keep their jobs, and they're under stress immediately because it's not who they are. So you stress your own people out.
Yeah.
People under stress do two things. One is they don't perform to their highest potential because they're actually fighting against themselves. And secondly, after a while, they will sabotage the organisation that's forced them into that position.
Yeah.
Not as a deliberate, malicious act, but by withdrawing support. And I was chatting to someone the other day, and there's a difference between saying to someone, stop, don't walk into that minefield, to someone who says, did you not see the sign over there to say there's a minefield here? So what do? Do you willfully help people, or do you just simply say it's not my problem? So the inauthenticity, I think, A, puts mental stress on people, and they have to release that pressure, and it's either by making the wrong decisions under pressure, or deliberately letting the organisation make the wrong decisions and take no responsibility.
Yeah, excellent. So when we started the immersion course, and it was in April, one of the first questions you asked was around what do you, the audience, perceive as some of the macro factors that are shifting the marketplace. And I think one of the factors that's in the public conscience, especially in the consciousness of business owners, is the rise of turbulence, if you like, or disruption in the marketplace. You know, we've witnessed so many massive institutions, the Lehmans, the Kodaks, the Blackberries, whatever, you know, these kind of pillars of society almost just collapse. What is the relationship between purpose and certainty/stability?
The way I put it is that if you feel the meaning of purpose is to buy people into a collective venture of which they care about the outcome, they are much more cognizant of the things that can hit the organization, so you get early warning, and they're much more creative in responding to it. So if purpose gets people to feel I'm part of a collective venture that I care about for the long term, A, they will send early warning signals, and B, they'll get you out of the crisis. So that's where purpose really wins. If you're into what is effectively a command and control structure that says, you're self-interested, I'll tell you what to do, you do what you do, you get to a sense is, even though I know this organization is going in the wrong direction, I know they won't listen to me, so all I'll do is keep my head down, and hopefully I'll bail out before it goes over the cliff. So if you're looking to respond to a fragile, agile, changing world, you need two things. One is people giving you early warning signs, and two is having people wanting to help you adapt. And that's what I think purpose does, because it engenders a sense of collective interest in the successful outcome of the venture.
Yes.
And just think about a regulated industry, that if you just rely on regulation, everyone strives not to make a mistake. If actually they care about the success of the venture, they will tell you early on about bad behaviors that are legal but are wrong.
But could lead to mistakes or lead to problems.
Exactly.
Yes.
Or taking big risks. So that's the difference, particularly in regulated industries, and most industries that become regulated, is imagine a sense of customers, regulators, and employees saying, hang on, I'm starting to see a slide, let's stop it, put my hand up, versus those say, well, everyone else is doing it, they won't listen to me, I will just go with the flow.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Are there certain examples of companies, either ones that you've worked with or ones that you've studied or read about, researched, whatever, that you think are, really worth looking into and are beacons or examples of how this model can operate?
Well, there are, but before I kind of give you some thoughts, my basic point goes beyond that, is every single company we work with has a pocket of excellence and change.
Yeah.
Most of those never come to a transformational change because they're frightened of the legacy that they're holding, and therefore won't proclaim the new because they'll be criticised for the past. And that's part of the problems that I would say to you, and I'd say to all the people you work with, within every single organisation, because there's a mindset shift going on, there are good examples. And we would say, look for that experiment and scale it. So that's the positive, that in every organisation there are pockets of excellence, and if they're properly nurtured, they can drive out the bad. The danger of naming companies as exemplars is twofold. One is they themselves would say they're not perfect and they trip over. And the second thing is it gives everyone permission not to be them, because they say, well, it's okay for them to say that, but we don't agree with it. But just common examples, if you look at Patagonia, who admit that they still cause environmental damage, but my God, they're going to try and limit it. They're really serious about what they're trying to do. You see it in the UK, in a particular recent sort of challenge between Unilever and a takeover bid is what's going on there. But Paul Polman has said publicly they're only 40% of the way there. And you can argue about some of the products they sell and the way they sell them, but you can't argue that someone's trying something. If you look at Southwest Airlines for a long time has given people responsibility and empowerment. You look at some of the examples in Laloux's book, Reinventing Organizations, companies like Buurtzorg. You can see examples. The reason I'm really nervous about holding them out is they would admit they're not entirely perfect. What they will say, and what we can find, is examples on each of the dimensions that we think are important as relationship-driven businesses, in terms of customers and suppliers, employees and colleagues, communities and future generations, people are doing things, what we're encouraging people to do is to say, why don't you lead on what you can lead on and connect with people you can learn from? And that's why I really worry about hero leadership and hero company leadership, because A, it frightens people, i.e. because we can't get there that quickly, and B, it enables others to say, that's not us, so we're excused and we've got a free ride.
Yeah.
So my challenge is much more straightforward. Every single company we work with, we've seen examples of great practice. And what we would say is every single company needs to look into itself, seek out the best practice, scale it, and make it who they want to be.
Amazing. Yeah. Fantastic. Really think this has been dynamite, Loughlin. Are there any particular resources, books maybe? I don't know if you're familiar with Yannick Silver. He's just written a book called The Evolved Enterprise, which I'm waiting to receive any day now in the post. He's somebody I'm very much a follower of, and his book is very exciting to me. Are there any other particular resources that you think are worth considering? Blogs or anything else?
Well, I think to be honest, I believe in serendipity, and it's connecting people to people, and occasionally having the books that you talk about. One in my library here, Standing on the Sun, which is something I looked at to rethink what I was doing. Listening, you got the article was part of the immersion workshop. Sumatra Ghoshaal's article on bad management theory driving out good management practices. Kate Raworth's new book on donut economics. It's having a curiosity.
Yes.
The only thing I would say is, in the quest of perfection, sometimes we don't do any action.
Yeah.
My belief is it's inherent with each one of us. We have this capability. Whatever trigger it is, maybe a book, a conversation, an experiment that allows you to start and remain curious, then what you will find, as we found at Blueprint, once we struck out and said, here's what we believe in, we were inundated with goodwill, resources, research that said, hey, if this is what you're interested in, we'll lean into you.
Yes.
And I say that to everyone is, talk to your friends about, be brave. Here's what I believe. And some will scoff, and some will say, actually, I believe that, but never had the courage to say it. And I read this book, and it helped me. So it's that courage, serendipity, and say, well, let's learn together. But don't outsource courage to books.
Yeah.
Use the books to insource the courage to yourself.
Yes, well said. Amazing. I think we could go on with this one for a long time, but probably wrap up. Appreciate your time immensely, your insights. Are there any other final closing thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, we need more people like you with the courage to have this conversation. And good luck.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Loughlin.